Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, politics, and philosophy nerd, Marine Corps, and law enforcement veteran. I would argue a real Republican, meaning that I hold real Republican values. A classical Republican, if you will. I am watching Sitch and Adam versus Dev, also known as ShortFatOtaku, and Actual Justice Warrior. They're debating the current Trump admin and transing kids. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'll be interrupting intermittently in order to add in my 2 cents. Let's take a look.
Important things in the process, I can't support it.
So you're for strong borders, but you think he's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where Adam, the disaffected liberal, should be like, oh yeah, I think he's doing it wrong too. I think violating due process, sending people to Sakkut, innocent people, and allowing them to be tortured and sodomized is bad. That should be like an easy bone to throw towards ShortFatOtaku. I have a suspicion that he's not going to throw that bone, though. Please feel free to prove me wrong, Adam.
Yes.
What about the trans women and women's sports?
Ah, okay. Instant pivot. Nice. Love it.
I mean, that's wrong. It shouldn't be happening, but I don't think it's that important. It's not like an issue of national importance. There's like 5 trans women playing sports. Like it doesn't fucking matter. It's like...
Haterade says you've changed my mind on that topic. Hell yes, export American culture. Long live the empire. True.
Devoting time to that when there's actual real political issues is just it's culture war retardation.
What about grade school? What about grade school kids or grade school teachers transing their classes?
Okay. So it feels like Adam is doing like a meme question, but then it feels like there's like a barb underneath there. So I'm kind of curious as to, how this is going to play out. What I'm going to say though, is I'm actually a little bit more conservative than Dev in this regard. So I think that if it's casual sports, right? If you're playing badminton at the tennis court, and it's not competitive, who gives a shit if there's a trans player? If it's like a youth league or a college league or a high school league, and there's not like really a discernible biological advantage for team badminton, right? I don't think I give a shit. However, when we get to things where scholarships are on the line or Olympics are on the line, like Olympic medals, then maybe we need to pay attention more to the biology. And so like frisbee golf, do we care if a trans woman participates in frisbee golf? Not so much. Do we care if a trans woman who just transitioned in the past 2 weeks, has not been on estrogen for a full 2 or 3 years, is engaged in combat sports? Probably, right? That's where I'm at anyways.
How often does that happen?
A lot. I think a lot.
Is it a lot though? Is it a lot, or is that just like Twitter basically like amplifying certain things?
There's definitely been a huge uptick in people identifying as trans.
So here's there is, and there's probably different reasons for that, right? And some of it probably is actually social contagion. Probably is some of it, the environment being more supportive and more conducive to coming out. There's a bunch of different things that it could be, right? The last instance where we actually had a teacher who was trying to trans her students, like just straight up the stereotype, when it was actually true, that I remember was October of 2021. And that was, I don't know if you guys heard the story. It was that one school in California where like they had these 2 teachers who started up what they called the Equalities Club in this school, and they were using their administrative access to track what these students were searching for on the school computers, on the school network. So if they searched for any sort of like gay or trans related topics, they would invite them to this club. And then one girl ended up being convinced by these teachers that she was in 6th grade, I think, and she was convinced by them that she was actually trans and she had to be a boy. And it turns out she was just bisexual, because she's now in high school, and she's like, no, I just like guys and girls. That's all it is. And then the school district ended up firing those 2 teachers who were involved with that, and they settled out of court with the family, and they got like a big fat payout. But like that's the last story that I recall of a teacher actually trying to trans their student. Everything else is like you have some You have some fat blue-haired teacher in a classroom somewhere who posts like an annoying TikTok where she has a pride flag up in her classroom, and that's stupid and it probably shouldn't be happening. But then Lives of TikTok finds that and posts that on their account and says they're transing your kids. One day your kids are gonna come home wearing dresses.
And by the way, I think this is unironically Ryan Mullally's talking point. Like I'm not trying to straw man the guy, and we're in a group chat, so we could probably talk about it at some point. But I think that one of the things that he actually objected to vociferously was the progressive sexual revolution being instantiated as academic fact within like elementary and middle schools, right? Because this is actually a fairly interesting perspective, is that puberty can start as early as 8. Okay. And I think that 5th grade is what age would 5th grade be? Because I remember being in middle school. Okay. Middle school, 5th grade ages, USA. In the United States, 10 or 11 years old. Okay. So 4th grade is where people can, rare, but can start puberty. And then 5th grade is technically elementary school, but that's where like puberty can start kicking in, right? And then 6th through 8th grade is where middle school is where puberty starts kicking in. And I remember middle school being super weird. And I'm just gonna be real from my middle school perspective. There were 3 girls who physically matured in 6th grade. Then I would say maybe 10 to 20% of the girls physically matured in 7th and 8th grade. And what happened is those girls who physically matured early, they got like all of the romantic attention from boys. And I'm not saying like it was anything crazy. Like they just went on like movie dates and held hands and stuff. But I'm saying like that happened where some people peaked early, I guess is the way that you would put it. And so as a result, they looked like they were like, I don't know, 16, something like that. They looked older, right? But then what was funny with the dudes too, because some of the dudes they hit puberty early. The dudes who hit puberty early, they were super short. And I felt bad. I had a friend named Adam. And Adam, nice guy. He's a perfectly nice guy. I'm not trying to dog on him. He's like a super talented basketball player. But Adam peaked early in puberty, so he looked like a man by like 7th grade, but he was like 5'5". And that was like we already knew that he was like fucked. Because he was short as a kid. He peaked early in reference to puberty. He hit a growth spurt, and then the growth spurt stopped. And then it was like, damn, bro, you're 5'5", and that's it. Like, that's rough. Like, no offense to my short kings, but like when you peak early, it's the advantage is that you can start dating earlier, and a lot of people will view you, if you're a guy who peaks early, they might view you as attractive in middle school. The disadvantage is you're stuck at 5'5". So that's a tough age. That's a tough age. Middle school's a tough age, for sure. Fucking Adam, man. Poor guy. Haterade says, if trans women give us advantage in the Olympics, the order it up, dude. More gold medals for the USA. No. Competition. We don't want to beat up the females. Plung Dark says, super edge case in which that happens. Everyone is going to be on your side if you're not a psychopath. Sure. Rob says, how would you tackle endocrine issues like a woman with elevated T in sports? So it's fine even if the outcome is the same. I don't know, dude. You know what? I'm not exactly like a sports guy. So for instance, there was that like black female runner who had an endocrinological issue where she was still biologically female. She still had fallopian tubes, but then she had like the testosterone levels of like a male competitor. And the question is, so she basically had like artificial PEDs, or she had organic PEDs. She had an endocrinological issue that gave her a biological advantage. But the argument that I've heard, though, is that I think she was ultimately barred from competition because it was viewed as an unfair advantage. But like Michael Phelps, as an example, the dude is like built to swim. He has like a 7-foot wingspan. You know, he has like a really high above average VO2 max capacity. And yet, despite him having biological advantages over his peers, we allowed him to compete and to win endless gold medals because he was just a freak of nature built for the game. So, I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I also know that it's not existential. That's the other thing, guys. Can we keep this in mind? Thank you, baby. Can we keep this in mind, that whether or not Michael Phelps wins gold medals for swimming is not an existential threat to the United States of America. Figuring out how to get trans people to participate in sports fairly at the collegiate and Olympic level is not an existential threat to the United States of America. And so I don't think that we need to treat it with this level of like uber seriousness. Like, we have to figure out how can trans people play badminton or the apocalypse happens. I just don't think that's true. So, anyways.
And you got to be aware of this. And then that gets fucking amplified and massively blown up. And it's like, listen, you got like, yeah, you have this problem, and it's a small problem, and it is happening, and it does need to be solved, but it's blown up like times 100 because there's money to be made grifting, basically fear grifting off of this nonsense.
Oh my God.
Well, okay, but wait, hold on. There's two different
Why is condescendingly saying, oh my God, an answer?
issues. There's the issue of how much does it happen? And then there's the issue of, okay, but it is happening, and it's probably mostly happening through social contagion, whether it be from institutions directly doing it or just teaching children or anyone that, you know, sex and gender is not real, or just like learning it from their friends on TikTok, right? So,
well, Haterade, yeah. So Haterade says, I think it's good for, you know, middle schoolers to know about, like, you know, that gay people exist, and that your friend was super psychologically fucked up because she didn't know that gay people existed for a really long time. Yeah, I don't know how to deal with that. I'll tell you the way that it was dealt with in my school, which didn't, you know, I felt was reasonable. I think we had sex ed. The first sex ed was, I think, in 6th grade or 7th grade. Okay. It was one of those. And the sex ed was very sanitized. It was very biological. It was, you know, hey, you know, we're going to split up into classes that are sex segregated. We're going to talk about male and female physiology. We're going to talk about reproduction. It was like very, very science-based. And it didn't make any prescriptions about sexual morality or homosexuality or heterosexuality. It was basically like, this is how human biology works, and this is how human sexuality works from a biological perspective. And then I would say in 7th and 8th grade, we started getting sex ed classes that were making more moral judgments. But what they did, which I thought was appropriate, I thought they did a pretty good job considering the sensitivity of the matter, is they actually presented an array of opinions. So we had the conservative, abstinence, the only way to have safe sex is to not have sex at all. You don't want to get pregnant. You don't want to get an STD. You don't want to do this while you're this age. You need to wait for marriage. Marriage is the best way to experience sex. We had speakers like that. But then the next speaker who came in was like a sexual moderate, I suppose. And the sexual moderate was like, hey, so the conservative perspective is a perspective that a lot of you and a lot of your families are going to want to adopt. However, if you choose to engage in sexual activity, this is how you can do it responsibly. And they would talk about, you know, I don't know, oral, manual, and they would use like incredibly sanitized terms. So it wasn't like they were being like vulgar or gross. They were being like really sanitized. And so they were using pretty sanitized terms in order to talk about like oral, you know, anal, vaginal, hand stuff, condoms, birth control, all that kind of stuff. And they did like a really, I would say, objective overview of the spectrum of what people believe early human sexuality should look like. And at no point was it like, if you're gay, you're bad, or if you're bi, you're bad, or if you engage in sex, you're evil. Like, it was none of that shit. And so as a result, by just presenting the spectrum of information that's available in regards to early human sexuality, I think ultimately they pushed the choice down onto the individual. So if you were from a conservative family and you wanted to live your life in a sexually conservative way, not only were you free to do so, but you were presented with how to live a sexually conservative life. Whereas if you weren't interested in a sexually conservative life as a, I don't know, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, whatever the age is for 7th or 8th grade, then you were told like, hey, here's all these risks: pregnancy, STDs, herpes, AIDS, HIV. We were told all the risks, right? But then we were also said that ultimately we're becoming adults and we're agents of our own bodies, and we need to make, as we become adults, we need to make adult choices. And so I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like that's relatively responsible. I think that's relatively responsible where you present a spectrum of behavior and then put the agency on the individual. I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but tell me in chat.
Would you?
I mean, kind of. I think the two issues are better described as one. It does happen sometimes, especially with some weirdo teachers out there who are doing weird things with their students, and that needs to be stopped. But the second issue is that those few times that it happens, such a giant spotlight is being disproportionately shown on these events.
No.
To the
Look,
point that everyone thinks it's happening everywhere.
Most
and
of the
that's
time,
also a problem.
Right. Most of the time, you're not going to get this like one-to-one. Here's the teacher, teaching the kid to be trans situation. Right. It's more of this environment or this attitude or a culture of trying to teach children. Oh, you're assigned at your gender at birth. You don't really have a gender. There's no such thing as gender. Maybe there's no such thing as sex. That's generally what people are talking about. And then they accuse people of like transing the children, opening the door.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. I mean, though, if we're going to talk about those specific topics, they should probably be like left till high school age, in my opinion, because you can't have a reasonable conversation about like, oh, what is the difference between sex and gender? Oh, what is actually being intersex? Like, these are real things that you can talk about in educational context. Wait till high school. That's it. You don't need to be talking about like what intersex is to a fucking 5-year-old, obviously, right? Like, as you go through school, things get more complex. That's normal. I think there's real problems here, but I think a lot of it actually is just a moral panic.
Well, so do you not think that?
I mean, I'm with you. There's real problems here, and we need to figure it out, but it's a moral panic. I think I'm okay with that. And by the way, sometimes it's okay to be panicked. If you're in the Pacific Northwest or California, and one day your son comes home in a dress, and he's like, oh yeah, Mrs. Johnson convinced me that I'm trans. I'm a girl now. Then yeah, go ahead, panic. But you can probably figure it the fuck out, right?
Because I would argue that I think based on the numbers, the majority of people now that are coming out as trans probably is from social contagion or not people that actually have gender dysphoria.
Possibly. I think it's also a redefinition of what being trans is, because for a long time you had.
Yeah, sorry. AFAB girls with a septum piercing who still like boys and they dress feminine, you're not trans. You're just edgy. You're just a middle schooler.
Had to have dysphoria.
In 2004, there was 2 weeks where every girl in high school or not high school, every girl in middle school. Well, actually, it was high school. It was like freshman and sophomore year of high school. There was like 2 weeks. Every girl in sophomore year of high school had 2 weeks where they were gay. Okay. They dated a chick. They held her hand in the hallway. They kissed each other in public. And then they were like, you know what? Actually, I'm not gay. Whoops. That happened in 2004. And I don't remember this degree of moral panic.
Or
Right.
maybe you don't have it anymore, but you would have it if you went off hormones. Like dysphoria had to be involved for it to actually be truly trans. But now there are some people who are saying, no. If you are gender non-conforming in any way, then you're some flavor of trans, which is, it's fucking stupid. Yeah. But that's like a classification issue and less like a, oh my God, people are getting mind raped into being trans issue.
Right. Okay. It seems weird because, well, I think this is how people perceive it is, because I don't know, it sounds like from what you just said that we share kind of a similar opinion in terms of like the numbers and people that are doing it coming out. You just don't think you could say it's not as worthy of you to spend a lot of time on. By sort of like the way that you're framing it instantly puts in everyone's mind that you're just downplaying the issue or trying to hide the issue.
No.
Okay. How? He admitted it's a thing. He admitted that the school admin needs to take action. He admitted that there's probably some degree. I don't even know if he said anything about the state, but he would probably say that in extreme cases, the state needs to be involved. For instance, when that teacher was intentionally trying to trans an autist, that person should have been fired. So how is he downplaying it? And by the way, what's the upplay? What's the level of severity? Like, what is the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen, if we were to run this logically, is that progressive teachers will run amok within middle school and high schools. They will cause a social contagion of female transition, and it'll probably be statistically rare, but it'll still happen. There will be teenage girls who get double mastectomy and hysterectomies from like doctors who just believe that if you consent to a surgery, then gender transition is fine. So that's like the worst that can happen. And I understand if you had a teenage daughter in particular, that could be alarming. Correlated with that, just because we shouldn't forget the trans women. What could also happen is maybe there's a few false positives with trans women. I feel like with that though, that's such a difficult path. Like if you were a trans woman, transition in middle school and high school has to be like brutal. Has to be absolutely brutal. I can't even imagine, like even in our current progressive era, I have to imagine that you're going to get the shit bullied out of you if you're a trans girl in public school. So yeah, so then there's going to be some trans girls, some assigned male at birth trans girls who might be like autistic and they're not actually trans and they don't have gender dysphoria. That's the worst case scenario. That's if school admins full-throatedly support this. That's if psychologists and psychiatrists just blank slate sign off on everything. That's if doctors are just crazy with it, and as long as somebody consents, they're going to do the surgeries, even if they're under the age of 18. That's if the parents sign off. That's like that's the worst case scenario, in my opinion. Now, is that serious and should we deal with it? 100%. Should we try to be nuanced in this conversation? Absolutely. Will this destroy the Republic of the United States, even if we were in the worst case scenario? No. Okay. No, this is not going to destroy the Republic of the United States. It's a fad. It's a moral panic. Maybe you should be panicked if you are personally affected by it. But I think we're going to survive this. I think we're going to survive the trans panic of the 2010s and 2020s.
I'm appropriately playing the issue. I think people put too much focus on this issue.
Yeah, because they worry about their kids. That's why people put a lot of emphasis on it. And if you have a kid that's in grade school.
Sorry, real quick. He's appealing, and Adam is appealing to like the individuals who were affected by it. Because in the aggregate, statistically, I think I'm correct. Adam is, I think, correctly pointing out that if you're the person who gets sucked up into this thing, you could be pretty shocked by it. Part of the reason why I'm so casual about it, I have two boys. They're gender conforming. They're very gender conforming. So I think the chances of them being trans is very low. And then not just that, they're kids. Like they're under the age of 10. So I think by the time that my kids are teenagers, the moral panic will be over and we'll have some degree or instinct of what to do. Leonidas Vizura says, I don't see how transing the kids issue isn't the inverse of unarmed black men being killed by police. What would be the counter to this argument? Of course, assuming the numbers are low. Yeah, but Leonidas Vizura, I think that my argumentation is parallel, okay, to the individual black person being murdered by cops while unarmed. Like Philando Castile, he had a concealed weapons permit. He had a pistol on his person. He told the law enforcement officer that he had a pistol on his person, and the cop freaked out and shot him to death. That's fucked up. There's no other way around it. That cop should be suspended. They should be prosecuted. They should not be able to work in law enforcement anymore. And Philando Castile's family, like, we can't get his life back, but Philando Castile's family should receive a large settlement because the state negligently killed their head of household. So Philando Castile is like the perfect example of like cops killing somebody who didn't deserve to be killed. And so I can say that the Philando Castile is fucked up and we need to pursue the civil and criminal penalties necessary in order to execute justice. However, I can also say that the average black guy driving down the street, as long as you're polite and you keep your hands at 10 and 2 and you don't violate the law constantly, you're probably going to be fine. You know? So my argumentation is almost identical.
Well, you're worried about this.
Well, sure, but like, what is the best way to distract from, you know, the Epstein files or the war in Russia, or
what is going to be worse? What is
let me just wait.
What? How do we get to Epstein?
What is the best way to distract from, you know, the Epstein files or the war in Russia, or
what is going to be worse?
Let me just wait.
Hold on. This is actually super true. Like, why don't you care that the president of the United States is a credibly accused person who allegedly sexually abused 14 to 17-year-old girls? Why don't we care about that? Why don't we care about, I don't know, the tens of thousands of people dying in Ukraine as a result of Trump's incompetence? Why don't we care about the USAID cuts that is going to result in hundreds of thousands or millions of deaths? It's because you care about transing the kids. That's why. It's a culture war touchstone. I think Dev is just fine.
What is going to be worse for you as a parent if your kid is wrongly diagnosed with gender dysphoria, or if the Epstein files never get released? Which is going to be more important to you as a parent?
No, I actually think that's an okay point. That's an okay point. I think a lot of people are self-motivated. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I agree.
So it's ridiculous what you're saying.
No, it's not ridiculous. Okay, hold on. This is where Adam's taking it too far. People, on average, should be expected to be selfishly motivated. And so if there's a hot topic culture war issue in reference to trans people, and you have teenagers or kids, and you're worried about your kid being incorrectly diagnosed with gender dysphoria and transitioned using the affirmative care model against your wishes through this like state sanction, then yeah, of course you're going to care about that passionately. However, we as political commentariat, Dev being a political commentator, Sitch being a political commentator, Adam being a political commentator, AJW being a political commentator, we should be able to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We can acknowledge the fears and anxieties of parents within the United States of America while still focusing on actually important geopolitical and criminal issues at the federal level. The fact that we have to, the fact that this needs to be explained is part of my criticism of Adam, is the nicest way that I can put it.
Is more likely to happen though.
Well, I don't even think I think that the trans issue is kind of like not so widely discussed that much anymore anyway. So I'm not sure. I don't think it's being used in that fashion. Like that was like really hot like a year or 2 years ago. I feel like now people just don't talk about it that much.
I don't know. I still follow Liz of TikTok, and she's still talking about like every fucking.
Well,
day.
that's like, but that's how she became like.
Hey, you're up in Canada, right? I think you're up in Canada. I mean, I live in, you know, purple now red Florida. So, you know, maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I'm assuming it's not happening in the Pacific Northwest or California as bad as people think it is, or Canada as bad as people think it is, because I'm in a red state. I don't know. I have to dial in my perspective.
Yes,
right? That was your entire brand. So,
but my point basically is that there's a lot of real political things you could talk about, and a lot of the right wing talking heads, when they know that like, oh shit.
Sorry, this is funny. Eli Gray says Gen Xers had to see enormous full projector screen close-ups of STDs and what can happen to you. We did have to get permission slips to attend though. Bubonic plague parts the ultimate abstinence.
Was going to be in the news cycle for a couple of days. That doesn't favor us. Let's just talk about the latest tranner on TikTok.
What's
like,
the
okay,
most?
I see what you're fucking doing. This is fucking retarded.
What do you think is the most important political topic to talk about right now?
Oh man, you know,
One of the most.
I almost
I mean, I think Trump incompetence is probably the main one that I care about.
Almost knee-jerk to the Epstein files, but it's not actually that important, to be honest. Like it's important in that Trump promised it, and it's a giant glaring hole in his entire administration and record that he hasn't released it yet. I don't know, maybe the healthcare stuff, because like the healthcare stuff and the looming government shutdown that's kind of surrounding it is going to be wild, I think, right now. In my opinion, you guys have been following that?
Yeah, but it's like these government shutdowns are always like they shut down the government. You know, it's a week, 2 weeks. I think the longest was like a month, which might have been in Trump's first term, if I recall correctly. So even though it's...
Can I do a trans drawing real quick? Can we do a paint? Is that all right? I think I want to do a paint. I want to do a paint. And by the way, quick shill before I paint. I don't have my Bob Ross wig yet. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. I parasocially love you guys. We're at 150. You know, we kind of stabilized at 150 after the Charlie Cook drama. So I appreciate you guys being here and allowing me to be a part of your morning entertainment. And then I do want to shout out and thank Beef Supreme for gifting a membership and renewing their membership. Lawson Harrison, Philip Coffey, Anonymous Chatter, and Sen Patty for your super chats. And Sen Patty, I don't think I've gotten to yet, but he says, have a good day, Connor. I picked the week for the government shutdown to go sightseeing national parks. Based. All right, so let's do a little trans drawing, okay? A little trans drawing. I think I could do this with this. I think I could do it with this many boxes. And I'm probably going to upset some people by not being like fully inclusive, but bear in mind, I'm just doing my best, okay? I'm just doing my best. So we have male, okay? Male sex. Small gametes or designed to have small gametes. And for those of you who don't know, I think gametes is just like sex organs. I could get corrected in chat if any of this information is wrong. Bear in mind, I am a former Marine, so I'm kind of stupid. You know, like I'm incredibly smart in some regards, and I'm incredibly stupid in others. Female, large gametes, eggs, ova, ovaries, whatever you want to call it, designed to have large gametes. Okay. So these I'm perfectly okay with. And I'm okay if you adding correlative stuff like XX or XY. I don't give a shit. Okay. But the point is that like this is a definition, a functional definition that seems repeatable in reality. Okay. Now, man, if we go with adult human male, man, adult human male, but also that's like the biological definition, I suppose. But then man correlates with a bunch of social behaviors like, I would say related to testosterone, like aggression, larger muscle mass, violence. I'm trying to think of what else, but it's correlative. It's not causative, right? We all know dudes who are pussies, but like, you know, it correlates with aggression. The more testosterone you have, the larger muscle mass you're going to have, the more likely you are to be aggressive, et cetera, et cetera. So these are correlative, not causative. Okay. And then with females, I could get really sexist with this really quick, but let's say that a woman is adult. Woman is an adult human female, but then also correlates with. I'm really trying not to be sexist, but I guess I'm just sexist at the end of the day. Frilly clothes, social competition, obsession with, I don't know, like I'm really trying not to be sexist, but it's just really hard. Social status within a pecking order. And like, of course, like males have their equivalent of this, But I also think that it's disproportionately true that like we've all seen the meme of the man who lives with like a single lawn chair and a TV in an unfurnished apartment. A woman would and often do find that level of furnishing of an apartment or a house intolerable. Okay. I lived with a woman. I live with a woman. Nesting and social dynamics seem to be a large part of the female brain. Now, is that always true? Of course not. Are there chicks who are more male brained? Absolutely. Is this all correlative and not causative? Absolutely. Am I being sexist? A little bit. Okay. Now, the argument for a trans woman or trans man is that, let's do this, that for a trans man, that they are born with the large gametes, but due to either gender dysphoria or to social pressure or whatever combination of like social pressure and genetics and whatever, there are people who are born with large gametes, eggs, ova, and ovaries, but they feel instinctively that they should have been a man. And so that's a trans man. And so sometimes they'll supplement this, feeling of gender dysphoria with, social transition, with testosterone injections, with all that kind of stuff, right? And then same thing in the opposite is there are men who are born with testes who feel like they should have been a woman. And so as a result, they, engage in feminine behavior. I don't want red, I want black. And so as a result, they're a trans woman. Now, when we argue this, what ends up happening is there's this like fight. And I guess we could throw non-binary in the middle, by the way, which non-binary could be somebody who has, testes, or they have ova and ovaries or whatever, but they just feel like they don't quite fit into the social category of man or the social category of woman. Therefore, they want to be off the spectrum or in the middle of the spectrum or whatever. Who, no offense, but I have a few non-binary friends, but nobody gives a shit. Okay, you're special. Everybody loves you. You're so sweet. You're so perfect. You're so ooh-woo. You're God's perfect little snowflake. Okay. But the point is that this is what we've been fighting over for close to a decade, is whether or not a male who goes for the social expression of a woman is truly a woman, or whether or not a female who goes for the social expressions of a man is truly a man. But one of the things that I really like this Counterpoints quote. The Counterpoints quote is like, some questions are meant to be resolved and some questions are meant to be dissolved. And what I like about that quote is, who gives a shit, right? At least from my perspective. Bex, I hope you don't mind me bringing you up, but like Bex is a trans gal who's super chill, fun to talk to, former Marine vet, intelligent, ambitious, trying to get into the Twitch and YouTube politics space. So she had small gametes, but she transitioned into socially and physically appear as a woman, and she looks like a woman, and she acts like a woman. So why don't I just treat Bex like Bex? Why don't I treat Bex like she's my cool friend? Same thing with Toftage. Same thing with Brianna Wu, even if you don't like Brianna Wu. Why don't you just treat them as people? And then same thing with the male transition. I think I have a non-binary friend who might have gone full male transition. I'd have to ask them if they're still non-binary. But they're still cool. They're still smart. They're still a good artist. They're still interesting to talk to. They're still a good friend. So do I have to resolve this scenario? No, I can just dissolve the scenario and say that they're trying to figure out how to live their lives in the best way possible within this mortal coil. And I don't have to understand everything about them in order for us to be friends. And so ultimately, if they're not abusing anybody, if they're not playing combat sports and beating in people's skulls, if they're not, using their identity in order to sexually predate upon other people, why do I give a fuck? I have a pretty liberal or libertarian perspective on this trans calculation. So I'm interested. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say on that. This is kind of my vibe right now. And then I'm not looking at the current chat. So what I would suspect is that there are going to be a healthy chunk of progressives and liberals who are going to be like, yeah, we shouldn't care at all. And then there's going to be conservatives who are going to be like, well, this situation happened where a trans person abused their social position in order to achieve this benefit or this sexually predatory situation. That's what I have a feeling, is that they're going to bring up those things. But hear me when I say this now. If somebody uses their identity in order to sexually predate upon anybody, or if they use their identity in order to obtain some kind of unfair privilege, then I think not only should we discuss that, we should probably eliminate the unfair privilege and then eliminate the predation. So you might think that we disagree because you're saying, well, a trans woman is not really a woman. They're actually a man because they have male small gametes. But I don't give a fuck. Okay. And same thing with the trans man thing. You might have the inverse argumentation, but I don't think I give a fuck. So some questions are meant to be resolved. Some are meant to be dissolved. And I think just being chill with chill trans people is a perfectly morally acceptable position. All right. I'm going to let them play while I scroll through chat.
I don't like the government shutdowns, but usually the situations kind of resolve themselves somewhat quickly without causing too much damage.
Yes, but it's usually because the Congress comes together and they pass.
Yeah, there we go. Haterade has like the perfect summary, at least very similar to my experience. In 5th grade, they taught us about the reproductive system and not to let people touch your no-no parts. 6th through 8th grade was STDs and safe sex and abstinence. 9 through 12 was third base if under 18. I don't think they told us. Hey. That last sentence they did not say to me. In freshman year, they didn't go, don't have sex, but get to third base if you're under 18. Nobody said that shit. That's funny, though.
As a budget, and they can actually get things going. But I mean, at this
someone
point,
capitulates.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, at this point, I guess the Democrats just got to grow a fucking spine and be like, no. We're not just going to do whatever the fuck you want. You need to actually art of the deal us and give us some of the things that we want, or we're just going to leave this. We're just going to leave this bitch shut down until the fucking election. Like, that's what they have to do at this point, basically, because the Democrats are just getting raped on everything. Well, the only thing they can do is actually,
I believe.
I don't think people are listening to what Dev says. I think they just know that he's like vaguely defensive of the gays and transes, and so they're like attacking him on an emotional level. I don't think they're actually listening to what he's saying, because what he's saying is just descriptively true.
Last time, the Democrats were perceived as the victors in terms of that the public broadly blamed Trump for the shutdown and perceived Trump as capitulating the shutdown. So I wouldn't see why the Democrats wouldn't just try to do the exact same thing again.
Yep, and they should. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean,
the framing the Republicans have done on the government shutdown, though, is great. Like, they're going to lose the government shutdown.
They're doing it because they want to give free healthcare to illegals.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Then does it matter that? Well, see, I don't actually know the fact claim of that, because I keep saying JD Vance say that, and then I keep saying the Democrats say that's just not true, and I haven't actually looked into. Is there some like weird way to construe that?
Grassroots. The worst case scenario is the doctors breaking into your house and transing you against your will.
Make that true.
Well, look, I'm just saying that's brilliant framing, and sure, the Democrats, the hardcore Democrats don't believe anything Republicans say, so they're going to say, "Oh, JD Vance is obviously lying." The Democrats are going to say he's lying. But I think moderates are going to go, is he lying? Like, especially in the wake of the last presidential campaign, when the biggest thing was Kamala Harris wanting to give free health care to trans prisoners.
That's a good.
So I think in the context now,
that
everyone's
even
going to be
true?
like,
Yeah,
well,
That sounds
she
ridiculous.
said it.
It was true. Yeah.
So people, I think, are going to gobble that framing right up, and they're just, the Democrats are going to lose big time if they shut the government down. Everyone's going to be like, oh, Democrats did it again. More.
I feel like that's sweeping just because it's like, it's brilliant framing, and the people are like, is that true? And he's like, it's true enough. All right. Eli Gray says, I'll watch the VOD, but what was your take on They Spit, We Hit, and how would you have reacted when you were serving in the Army as an officer, Connor? Was that a Hegseth quote? If it's about like hazing or whatever in reference to like boots, I don't care about that. We got hazed. They didn't call it hazing. They called it, remedial training or some they IT intensive training. They called it intensive training, corrective training. So, but it was hazing. I don't give a shit about hazing coming back. That's fine. As long as it's not like, as long as it's within reason, as long as people are not actually getting injured or killed, I'm okay with hazing as a part of boot camp. But then we, just because I didn't see the Hegseth quote that you might be talking about, if you're talking about Hegseth, They Spit, We Hit. I'm okay with that in principle. Like if somebody lines up on you and they do something repulsive to you, you don't have to meet them identically reciprocally. Somebody spits on your face, you can punch them in the jaw.
There they are.
I mean,
the
typically
Republicans are for you, and the Democrats are for
Adam. You fucking said in your chat.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Conservatism says, my concern is multifaceted, but I have a young man in the family, age 7, who has no father and 3 sisters. He enjoys using tools when I'm around, but wears nail polish and wanted a sparkly pink backpack. Any busybody teacher could push him in that direction. That may not be true to his nature, and I'm glad some young men have fathers and positive examples in their nuclear families. Yeah, so I think that's the kind of thing that we need to look out for, is vulnerable kids who are hanging out exclusive, like through no fault of their own, are hanging out exclusively with the opposite gender and might not be getting socialized in line with their gender, in line with their sex, right? And so, but I think the solution to that is not to vote for Trump. I think the solution to that is mentorship. Go out of your way to hang out, talk to the mom or whatever. If it's like a nephew or a friend's kid or something like that, just be like, hey, I know John's, he said that he was interested in monster trucks or whatever. Can we go? Bring the mom if you can find a babysitter. Can we go to a monster truck rally? Can we go to a drift race? Can we go to a baseball game? Can we, do something? Can we go on a nature hike, something like that? Can we go to the science center and take a look at like gross, slimy creatures and like spiders and snakes and fish and piranha? And the whole reason why I'm bringing that up too is that one of my frustrations with the modern conservative movement is they want you, conserve liberalism, to be so busy as an employee that you're working 60 to 80 hours a week in order to make ends meet. And when you say, hey, I can't make ends meet because I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week, they're like, well, tough shit, get good. But if you were working 40 hours a week and you had money in your checking account, then not only would you have the energy to go mentor this young man, but you would have the money to mentor this young man. You could take him shooting. You could get him a BB gun. You could go to the baseball games. You could go to monster truck rallies. And so that's where economic justice is floated as an exclusively left-wing concept. But I think any conservative who's worth their salt, they should also care about men being present in the household and men being present in their communities and not being so enslaved to work that they can't mentor the next generation. And that is like a critical flaw in conservative politics that I find repulsive. I find it genuinely repulsive when conservatives say, oh yeah, you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, tough shit. I think that's disgusting. I think they're destroying their own communities.
Just now, Dev doesn't care if your kid gets trans. Are you fucking serious?
You said that.
No, I didn't.
You said it's no biggie. You said it's not a big deal.
No, I didn't.
He said it wasn't existential, Adam, you fucking idiot.
You said it's nothing to worry about. It's a moral panic. It's a figment of your imagination.
Oh, Sitch, did I say that? Please.
Yes.
Deb,
No, you didn't. You're straw manning because you're a dick and you don't pay attention. You're going off of emotions, not off of the word said.
did not say that.
I did not fucking say that.
Which is what I was trying to explain to you, Dev, in terms of how you were communicating the idea.
Adam felt the vibes. I didn't actually say, you know what, Adam, I want only your kids trans specifically.
You don't
Based, get him.
look. Look,
Yeah, but the idea that you can't care about that issue or like you are obligated to prioritize your priorities, that's like not how politics or
Nobody said that, you stupid fucks. He said that it's not existential and that there are other things going on that we should give a fuck about and we should be able to walk and chew bubblegum. Now, maybe I said that, but I feel like that's what Dev was pointing at.
or how human beings work. Like, again, like you could say it's not an issue, but if it's not an issue, why did the state of California pass a law saying that school officials can hide gender transitions from their parents?
Yeah,
like it was a big enough issue for them to do that at the local level, and people's local government ends up impacting them way more than like federal government stuff. So like on a day-to-day basis. So like that's why it's an issue.
So when we were talking about it earlier, I think you were gone during this part. I don't know if you're like listening with your headphones or something, but basically my position on it is it's a real issue. I understand why people care about it. It's not like it's not like it doesn't happen. It's not a nothing issue. But like, one, I do think that there are more important issues, but two, more importantly, is that the issue, although it is real.
Tristan Clark points something out, which is walking and chewing gum has been bastardized to mean that it's difficult to do two things at once. But realistically, the actual phrase means that it should be incredibly easy to do both. I accept that. But I think in our current political environment, people act like walking and chewing gum is insanely difficult. I think you can culturally push against. Like, for instance, they're talking about, well, in California, in some school district, it actually was stated policy that teachers, if they feared abuse in the home, could hide gender transition from potentially abusive parents, and that should be alarming. Well, I think you can push back against that and say that the school system defaulting to treating parents as adversaries rather than collaborative, like it takes a village, collaborators in raising a child, there's obviously something toxic and fucked up there. And not only should you criticize that, you need to fix it. But at the same time, you could admit that the Trump administration is fucking disastrous, right? So yeah, I'm trying to get these guys to walk and chew gum, but they don't seem capable or interested.
And it should be given its appropriate due weight.
The likelihood is slim. We understand. Okay, you don't have to say it again.
It's not just like the likelihood of swim. It's that there are bad actors who pump up the importance of the issue beyond what it actually should be because they want you to feel scared. They want you to be afraid. They want to basically mind fuck.
Haterade says, why is the narrative maybe you're trans, so let's start cutting things off? Why are we skipping the therapist, psychologist, and doctor's part? There's a way to diagnose gender dysphoria. Well, Haterade, I think that was the affirmative care model from several years ago that a lot of trans activists were arguing was the appropriate model, where they were saying that like psychotherapy and parental consent and all that kind of stuff, these were unjust obstacles to people who were suffering from gender dysphoria that might be so serious that they ultimately take their lives. And that's probably because a lot of the trans activists, they probably had brutal experiences. If they were trans themselves, they probably had difficulty transitioning. They probably had difficulty accessing drugs. They probably had judgmental family members and employers and school teachers who were hostile to their trans identity. That's probably where that's coming from. However, I do think that just because these people were injured by the transition process doesn't mean that you're not right in that we should probably diagnose your other psychological issues. Do you have anxiety? Do you have bipolar disorder? Do you have ADHD? Do you have autism? We should figure out all those things and we should treat those things as well. And then if gender dysphoria is persistent and prolonged, then we need to ask about transition. And one of the things that I'm just going to throw this out there, I kind of think it's silly, but I also think it's funny. I think that transition, if we were truly to analyze transition, we wouldn't just do like placebo and letting people go through puberty and seeing if the gender dysphoria desisted, which there's a psychological survey from like 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Canada. It was one of Jordan Peterson's friends who was saying that like 80% of people who suffer gender dysphoria as teenagers, they acclimate to a homosexual identity by adulthood. So are these people who can desist if there's no medical intervention? And how do you differentiate desisters from non-desisters? And then if truth be told, like, I'm just gonna be real here. I wonder if part of gender dysphoria is failing to identify with your current, correlated gender. And if becoming more like your correlated gender would alleviate your gender dysphoria. Now, I've heard anecdotes that, let's say that you're kind of like a feminine man and you compensate by doing more masculine shit. I've heard anecdotally that can make gender dysphoria worse, but I would want to study that phenomena, because what would it be if like gender dysphoria correlated with low testosterone levels, and then once you go on a higher kick of tea, you're like, oh, my gender dysphoria disappeared because I actually feel like a man. I would be interested in that psychological survey.
Fuck you.
They want you to be informed that it could happen to your kids. Okay.
They want their penises to enter into your brain.
I mean, again, but there's like this, there's like
coming
this constant,
over and over again.
There's like this constant like double speak about this issue where it's like, oh, the Republicans are ginning up hysteria about the trans issue, but also we're passing a law that says that we can hide this from the parents. Like, so either it's a real issue or it's a fake issue. And
no, there's a spectrum of severity. It can be a real issue while still not being an existential threat to the United States of America. I feel like that should be obvious to anybody who has an IQ above 80, but it's just me and my chat. My chat is 3,000 IQ. I have 3,000 IQ. We're all by ourselves getting our dicks kicked in by the culture war, but we're doing our best.
A lot of times people on the left say it's a fake issue or not that serious, but then they gloss over all the laws that are passed to subvert the parents in favor of the supposedly non-existent issue.
Exactly.
Okay. It is a real issue with a bunch of fake shit tacked on to the end of it.
Like what?
So did he say that it's not a real issue? Because I guarantee you they're going to keep treating him as if it's a non-issue.
What?
Yeah, what's the fake shit?
The fake shit was what we talked about earlier when basically...
I'm going to add that. Telling me to do dishes / take out the trash. Yeah, can't argue with that one. Sorry, I should explain for the people who have no idea what I'm laughing about. So when I'm always like 10 minutes behind in chat, right? I'm 20 minutes behind in chat right now. So I'm always catching up with chat in the past. And so I was doing my trans drawing in Grassroots Hegemon when I was describing what female or woman correlated behaviors are. He wrote nagging me to do the dishes. And so as somebody who identifies with that statement, I'm going to go ahead and put, a large part of the woman's social identity is telling their partner to do dishes or take out the trash. It's so true.
People think it's happening way more than it actually is. Like
you're
the
just
idea
saying
that, like,
it's
all
improbable.
these teachers are transing your kids. It's like it's not.
Look, if you play Russian roulette, it's improbable that you will shoot yourself in the head with a bullet. Okay, it's still a serious fucking thing.
He already said that, dumbass. You're just not listening to the words. You're going off of the emotions instead of the words being said. Dude, I hate this. One of the things that I realize in Twitch and YouTube politics, and you guys need to check yourselves as well. You need to check yourselves when you're having a conversation. Listen to the words being said, okay? Don't go off of the vibes, because the vibes right now are that three centristy right guys who, two liberals and a libertarian who are now center right, are bullying a center left guy because the center left guy is sweeping for trans shit. But if you actually listen to the words being said, he's not sweeping. He's just saying that there's hysteria surrounding the situation. And if you actually look at what's going on, it's not as serious as the hysteria. That's all he said. And that is sweeping from their perspective on an emotional level, but not a literal level, because they're not paying attention to the words. AK Batasui says, and the underlying major problem was that there were activists who were intent on destroying the nuclear family model as being the socially prescriptive models. Sure. And I hate that shit. And they're wrong. I think the extended family model, can I draw again? I want to draw again. I love drawing. Okay. So the extended family model, I think, is better than the nuclear family model. Okay. So let's do nuclear. Let's do extended. And let's do tribal. So because I genuinely think that the tribal model is what people like Vaush and crazy communal leftists push. And I actually hate the tribal model. I'm okay with the extended family model. I am not okay with the tribal model. Okay, so let's take a look at this, because this actually is genuinely important for argumentation, and I feel like everybody loses it. So family models, okay? So I would argue the straw man of the nuclear family model is mom and dad, or I should say dad and mom, mildly patriarchal, 2.5 kids, and that's the nuclear family. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and label this nuclear. But what a lot of people are realizing, this was possible, in my opinion, in the 90s for the middle class and the upper middle class, because dad was bringing in $250,000 a year when inflation was nowhere near as bad. Mom was bringing in $30K with a side hustle, or she didn't even work. And then she was raising 2.5 kids on the nice part of town, right? That's the nuclear model. And by the way, that's okay. If you can afford the nuclear model, good for you. But most people, most working class and middle class people cannot afford the nuclear model. So the extended family model would be grandparents, grand uncles and aunts. And then I would say uncles and aunts helping to raise the kids. Okay? And then I would say dad, mom, and excuse me, dad, mom, 2.5 kids. Okay. And then over here, you would have the cousins. And so this is the extended model, cousins. And I'll put like friends, friends that might as well be family, friends, that's fine. And so the whole point of this is that when it comes to the domestic responsibilities and financial responsibilities of a household, the nuclear model is an incredibly privileged position. You effectively can hire a nanny, hire a house taker, your wife can stay home, your wife can homeschool, you can put your kids into private school, you can hire tutors, you can effectively hire out through money all the social responsibilities of grandparents, granduncles, and aunts, helping to raise the kids, along with cousins and friends. Well, I guess this would be uncle and aunt and cousins, but you're good. And then friends being peers who help you raise the kids. I should change this to unc and aunt. Cousins, unc, and aunt. Okay. And I'll move cousins below, because cousins shouldn't really be like raising the kids. They should maybe be babysitters, right? So let's move cousins down. Okay. And I like the extended model. Dude, I've been a part of the extended model. I think Hispanics are really good at the extended model. I think that healthy families ideally are in the extended model. But what ends up happening is the left-wing social agitators, they advocate for the tribal model, which is effectively like grandparents and uncles and aunts, grandparents, unks, and aunts, then I'm going to be rude about it. Friends, like elders, and then I'm going to argue strangers. And the reason why I'm saying this is because straight up, I'm not trying to steel man here. I know we got a few people who like live in polycules or whatever, but like, I swear to God, their alarm system for abuse is not the same as mine. It's just not. Polycule with 10 dudes and 5 chicks and 20 and 2 kids or and 1 kid. You know, all right, I'm straw manning, okay? I'm straw manning. This is a straw man of the polycule thing. But I swear to God that they act like when they're advocating for the extended model, well, excuse me, they say the nuclear model is bad. And like the logical step is the extended model, but then they argue for the tribal model. And I'll put strangers down here too. Because I swear to God, they just don't have the threat matrix where they think that grandparents, uncles, and aunts could be abusive, that elders of the community could be abusive, that strangers could be abusive that are like elders in the community, and then strangers who are peers to their kids could be abusive. And they just have this like whole dynamic where they're just like, yeah, well, we're like all in a commune, bro, and we all know each other, and we all trust each other, and we all love each other. And Matt fucked my wife last week, but you know what? I had sex with, my wife's best friend, and, it's all good. And so, like, dude, I hate that shit. I just hate it. Nuclear versus extended versus tribal. And so, anyways, the polycule with 10 dudes and 5 chicks with 1 kid, and the 10,000 different people raising the kid, I think is a ripe for abuse model. But, if you can pull it off, good for you, I guess. Anyways, all that to say, nuclear is okay if you can afford it, but most people can't afford it. I think the extended model is ideal. I think the tribal model, people who advocate for the tribal model try to use the extended model to argue for it, but then when you actually ask them what they want to do, they go to the tribal model. Anyways, back to it.
Okay, hold on.
Wait,
Adam,
hold on.
Adam, if I handed you a bowl of M&Ms and some of them were poisoned.
Christ.
Mhm.
Let me
Go ahead.
Okay, let me phrase it this way. So, because that point that Sean brought up, I think is true. Where, like, yeah, there are a lot of school
AF Racing says, guys, we're about to solve the trans issue. I can feel it in my gametes.
districts in a lot of states that are trying to pass a lot of legislation that seems to promote the ability for teachers or institutions to hide this information from parents, or even to push sort of
Dice 5 for the $5. Counterpoints ASMR. We'll add a little gamete over here, a nice little chromosome there. Oh, don't worry about the mistake. We're all happy little accidents. Quick shill before we continue. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Just shout out to Dice 5, Send Patty, Anonymous Chatter, Philip Coffee, Lawson Harrison, and Beef Supreme for your financial support along with your eyeballs. And shout out to the roughly 130 to 150 people who have hung out with us so far today.
trans topics on children that people perceive as too young, right? And I think Dev, which I'm assuming you're against all that, but I think if you are, you should be very clear and say that you're against all that stuff, as opposed to just sort of saying like, well, it's not a big deal.
I'm against that stuff. Yes.
Okay.
But
you understand that if you just say like it's not a big deal, the vibe becomes.
Well, I didn't only say that though. Okay.
No, I know you did. I'm explaining the vibe to you. I'm explaining the vibe to you.
Yes, this is a vibes-based conversation.
Got to reach the vibe. Got to touch the vibe. Okay.
Yeah, like it is absolutely bad when it happens. But I also do think, at the same time as saying that it's bad, I'm not saying that it's not bad. All right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also do think that people blow up these instances and make them out to be worse than they are, for as bad as they actually are. They make them even worse than that because they view some political advantage and scapegoat.
I feel like the left.
I mean, that's politics, though.
I think
Yeah,
the left
there is a
blows-
political advantage because people care about it.
I think the left blows
that's
the
bad.
issue up too, though, right? Wouldn't you agree with that? Like, it feels like there's a lot of topics on, oh my God, the trans suicide rates are so high, we have to bend over backwards and change all of society for this very small amount of people.
That's
like,
the moral panic.
I feel like the left kind of
I
started.
completely agree.
Yeah, I
and
think
that's
I feel
why
like the
I've
left
made
kinda
videos against that
started-
too. Such like, yes,
Wait,
I've talked about how all of this stuff is bad. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again, if I said like, oh, well, the left blows up school shootings when like, you know, and they talk about the like AR-15 when there's only like 300 rifle deaths a year in the United States of
Yeah,
America.
what's the big?
Yeah, but you unironically make that argument, and so do I.
Most people are
deal?
getting killed by pistols. Like that still doesn't mean that parents aren't going to be concerned about school shootings. Like that's not going to be something that they're
And I don't think Dev ever said anything contrary.
worried about, even if the likelihood of it happening in their kid's school and then their kid being hit by a bullet and then their kid, like it keeps getting like infinitely less less likely to happen. That doesn't mean it's not a legitimate concern. Like again, but on the flip side of that, you don't have people passing laws that protect school shooters or like hide them from their parents or make the teachers like allowed to ditch them in the school or use them as human shields or like anything equivalent. Like, you know, we hear about like, oh, the trans suicide rate is incredibly high. If the school figured out your child had depression with a much lower rate of suicide and they hid that from you, you would be able to sue the school and you would make millions of dollars if your kid took their own life. But in California, state law protects the kids and says you can't tell the parents that their child is going through this thing with an extraordinarily high risk of at least a suicide attempt. And like, that's absurd. Like, so people are concerned about that. Even if it's not their kid, the fact is the school is compelled by law to be able to hide this, or teachers are compelled by law to hide this.
I agree with you. Can you? And you
but that's what people are concerned about.
So I agree with you with all that. Can you steel man why they're doing it though?
Because they say, oh, they might get thrown out of the house or like they'll get punished at home and it'll be worse for the kids at home.
Yeah, it's the same logic as like if you're a gay student and then you come out. You know, if you think you might be gay, you might be bi or something, and you're in high school and you're like, oh man, if I told my parents, they'd kick the shit out of me or I'd be homeless or something. And I think the core issue ultimately is that people treat being trans the same as being gay when they're not the same thing, because that logic makes complete sense. If you were like a gay student, like I don't think that schools should be telling parents, oh, listen, I think that your child might be gay. You know, I saw him holding.
Okay, you guys are talking about state. Way to drag it down, dude. We were talking about like gametes and we were talking about like trans people and we're talking about like fun shit. And you guys have to drag it down with state law. State law, California, trans kids don't tell parents. New California law, AB 1955, seeks to keep parents in the dark. Okay. California's AB 1955, signed into law in July of 2024, prohibits school districts from requiring staff to notify parents about a student's gender identity or sexual orientation without their permission. The law aims to protect gay kids who may not be safe or welcome in their homes, ensuring schools provide a safe and confidential environment for students to be themselves. About a student district, prohibits school districts from requiring staff to notify parents about a student's gender identity. I'd actually have to check like forced outing, right? Forced outing. I don't know, dude. I don't. So this is the question. This is the question to the conservatives in the chat, okay? If your kid is trans, okay, or if let's say you use it as a neighbor's kid, okay? Neighbor's kid is trans or gay, and they, do you think the school is compelled to notify the parents? Okay, so the kid is wearing a polo shirt and khaki pants when he shows up to school and Sperry's, but then he goes into the kid's bathroom and he's, I don't know, 15, 16, 14, some shit like that. Some teenager, and then he changes into booty shorts and a dress, and he puts on nail polish and guy liner, and then he walks around, and it's not a violation of the dress code, and he's otherwise a good student. And then when it's like 3 p.m. or 2:30, whenever the kids are getting picked up from school, they go back into the bathroom and they take off their nail polish, they take off their guy liner, they change back into the polo and khakis, and then they get into their car. Should it be required for the school to report that kid is doing like weird shit with their clothes and personality to the parents? You can answer that question. I don't think I have a good answer. I don't have a good answer. Now, I know as a parent, I would want to know if my kid was doing crazy shit like that. But I don't beat my kids, and I don't plan on beating my kids. Whereas I'm sure there's some parents who would probably find out that their kids were dressing gay, and they might beat them. So I don't know. Should the school be compelled to tell the parents about their kids' non-gender conforming identity? I don't think I have a good answer. Anyways, we're going to give this another few minutes, but I think that Dev is largely being attacked on vibes, and I think we've covered a lot of good ground. So I'm going to give them like another few minutes to make another few points, and then we'll move into the next segment.
Hands with another boy at school. It's like, no, you don't need to fucking tell parents that. That's fucking ridiculous. But because being trans has this medical side to it, it's not just like an identity side. Now you have to involve the parents, because now we're talking about medications and there's actual side effects, and it's a whole fucking thing. So like I do think a lot of it just stems from the fact that there's a big social push to treat being gay as if it is like being trans and vice versa, when they're not the same thing. So I ultimately agree with you that like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh no, it's actually really good that students are hiding children transitioning. I'm not going to fucking say that. That's fucking ridiculous. What I'm saying is there are just.
Yubi Madara says, Connor, you keep pushing back against them as if they're arguing it's an existential issue. No one's arguing that. Yeah, but the entire past 5 minutes has been Deb saying, hey, this isn't an existential issue, and I think there's a lot of hysteria tacked on to serious shit. And they're like, yeah, well, we're justified in freaking out about it. Okay.
Just more important issues for politics to be focused on.
But you say that, and that's like a very, dare I say, elitist position, because the way that people interact with politics is like how it impacts.
Which is why I hate democracy, by the way. I'm going to say it again. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones.
Them and their family. So like, I can think there are more important issues than like whatever the thing is that's bothering somebody in their local community, like whether or not they're going to build triplexes or.
S points out, Connor, and when they tell us to take out the trash, they mean right now. Yeah, I know, right?
Build 5-story buildings in their area.
Damn, y'all are getting crazy sexist in my chat. Add to the woman column, not being mad, but just thinking it's funny that. Oh, man, that's funny.
But the fact is, your average person in that neighborhood actually cares about that more than they care about like the war going on in Ukraine. Like they have no context for like how that impacts them directly in comparison. So yeah, like it's rational and expected for people to be more concerned about stuff that potentially impacts their children rather than like something that we all might care about more because we're way more into politics. The average American does not engage with politics in the way that we do.
Yeah, but do you know what we're advocating for consistently that I think Dev and I also advocate for is, hey, you're political pundits. You have 1,000 people in your chat right now. Hundreds of thousands of people watch your post-recorded videos. Stop playing to their stupid biases and call them out on their bullshit. I think that's what Dev and I say very typically.
Maybe register to a political party. They might vote R down the ticket or Democrat down the ticket, and that's about it. Maybe one candidate they find particularly off-putting, so they'll split the ticket. But that's really like the maximum engagement that these people have.
So that's all true, and it's normal, it's expected, we understand it, and yet it's being exploited by bad actors who know that people engage with politics.
Eric Dom says, where do patchwork families fit into this? I feel like that's more prevalent today. Yeah, so if I was going to pull this up, because I know a patchwork family. I know 2 patchwork families, and they actually work incredibly well. Let me pull it up. Where do patchwork families? So for patchwork family, for me, I don't know if you mean it this way. I mean, I'll tell you the way that I mean it. Patchwork family is kind of like a part of tribal, in my opinion. And to describe the families that I know, there was a couple who was married who had two kids. And just through like work and stress and ambition and ego, they were not capable of staying together. And so they didn't, they split up. But what ended up happening was the dad got a new girlfriend and they're happy together, no more kids. And then the mom got with another dad who was divorced, but had sole custody of his two kids because the mom was a piece of shit. And so as a result, they're now raising 4 kids together as a family unit. And the stepdad, I guess, or the divorced dad who has a girlfriend, he helps out, weirdly enough, not just with his 2 biological kids, since his wife and him are actually on good terms and he's in a new loving relationship that's more his speed, they actually don't hate each other. And since they don't hate each other, dad still fills the dad role, mom still fills the mom role, then another dad from another family fills the dad role, and they're together and they're raising 4 kids. The divorced dad is now filling an uncle or aunt role, and then they still have like grandparents, granduncles, and friends helping out, help take care of the kids and raise a family unit. So what I would say is, even when I'm making fun of the tribal model, you could almost argue that the patchwork family is almost a split between the extended model and the tribal model. I think as long as these roles are being fulfilled, where you have a paternal primary caretaker for the kids, you have a maternal primary caretaker for the kids who are making sure the kids are not being abused, and then you have people who fill the uncle and aunt roles and the cousin role and the friend role and the grandparent role. As long as people are like fulfilling their roles, I don't care whether or not it's biological. I have friends. The reason why I included friends in this graph is because I have friends who I love more than blood. I have friends who I trust more than blood. And so friends, while they're not blood, they are people who I would trust to fill the uncle or aunt role or the cousin role. So yeah, I think patchwork families are fine. You just have to fulfill the roles and make sure there's no abuse.
Politics in this way, and so they will spin up basically Twitter. No, don't laugh at him. It's fucking true. Like,
it's not bad actors though. It's just that's an insanely ridiculous view of politics.
No,
it's not. It's an intelligent way of viewing politics. And if you had an IQ over fucking 80, then you should be able to deal with more than one concept at one time, Adam. God, this guy pisses me off. Fabian Padilla says, Buenos dias, compa Connor. Hello. Jersey Hammer says, gee, almost as if lefties are dishonest fuckbags hiding the true arguments within a fake argument. Jersey Hammer, calm down. Whoever pissed in your Cheerios, say you're sorry. Relax. Quick chill. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them. And let's go ahead and give them another couple of arguments, and then we're going to wrap this segment, move into the next one.
No, it's not. Okay, hold on. Do you think that like Libs of TikTok is a good actor? No fucking
Oh, answer that question, Adam. Don't dodge.
way.
Libs of
Absolutely
TikTok understands that people care about this issue.
Oh, nice dodge, you fucking loser.
I didn't ask you that.
Look, Libs of TikTok would not be a big channel if people didn't care about this issue.
That's not the question either, you fucking asshole. He's asking whether or not Libs of TikTok acts honestly in portraying information, or if they're a hyperbolic, partisan, propagandist shitbag.
Is she a good actor?
I've never seen her act.
Now you're being obtuse to be a fucking dickhead. Dude, I'm sorry. This is part of the reason. There's a part of me that wants to go back on Sitch and Adam so we can fight about real topics, because I have a feeling that our moral intuitions and our moral grounding are actually quite parallel. There's another part of me that if I was in the room and he was doing this to Dev, I would call him to stop. I would tell Adam, stop being a fucking loser and answer the question. Answer the question. Because you're grilling Dev on his positions as if everything is deadly serious. Then he asks you an earnest question, and instead of answering it earnestly, you dance away from the question twice. Answer the question earnestly.
Okay. So
what do you mean? What are we both? Here's what I mean. Talking about good or bad actors.
So here's what I mean, right? Okay. You have people.
On Anonymous, I don't like the. I was saying that I don't like nuclear. I like extended. I think extended is the best model.
Who have, let's say, ulterior motives, and then they will latch on to what people do genuinely care
Look,
about for real reasons.
Hold on. There's one miscommunication going on here. You seem to think that it's relevant how much it's happening, okay? And you're saying she's trying to make it seem more prevalent than it actually is. When I think people care more about how is this going to impact my life? How catastrophic is it going to be if this happens? And they do a formula. They have the likelihood of it happening and the catastrophic nature if it does happen. And if it's catastrophic, it doesn't matter if it's barely
low likelihood. Okay, that's a coherent point. I have to give Adam. People are emotional creatures who, like school shootings, man. Like as an SRO, 20% of the conversations I had were about a school shooting. Okay, as a school resource officer. However, the likelihood of it happening is akin to getting struck by lightning. But Adam is correct. The reason why we talked about it as if it was a high possibility was because the catastrophic nature of that event is so serious that even if there's an incredibly low chance of it happening, we would still need to be prepared for it to happen. That's a perfectly valid insight.
Happening at all, they're going to be worried about it. If sending your kids to public school is Russian roulette because you may get one of these teachers, why the fuck does school have to be Russian roulette? Didn't we have school at one time when it wasn't Russian roulette?
No, this was never the case. In my parents' generation, they didn't let black kids into the school because they were so dangerous. So no, Adam, whatever, like even in the 80s, like school violence was super routine, like fist fights, shootings, stabbings, hard drugs, sex, all that kind of stuff. Like the 80s and 90s were fucking wild from a criminal statistics perspective. So no, whatever like safe non-Russian roulette place, the closest time that we ever had to a safe Russian roulette for public schools was probably the 1950s, and black kids weren't allowed into the school. So if you want to go back to like segregation, mass incarceration, and like, you know, white suburban America of the 1950s, we could try that. I just don't think it's going to work.
Like, what? This is like, why do we want to put a pedo in every fucking other classroom? And
do you think that's what's happening, Adam, or are you being a hyperbolic propagandistic piece of shit as well? Do you think every other teacher is a fucking pedophile? What is this guy talking about?
Be like, that's no big deal.
Okay, Adam. Okay, this is the feminist, like, why should I date a man because some of them are abusive argument. Like, no. This is not what I'm fucking saying. Listen. I'm saying that all of these things that you're talking about are true. They're real concerns. People actually do have these concerns. From their point of view, it's completely rational for them to be worried about these things. What I'm saying is you have bad actors who know that individuals on the ground have these concerns, and they play them up to be more common than they are because they want to
they're showing the catastrophic nature of them.
Let me fucking finish it, please. Let me actually get through the sentence. Okay. So they play up how common.
Yeah, who's the true guardian of your child? You or the state? It's you. Absolutely, I'm with you. My child is my child. Now, my child has some level of rights. If I'm abusing my child, the state has the right to intervene. However, we need to discuss what actually abuse is, of course.
These things are to make them appear more common than they are, not to show off how catastrophic they are, though they do show off how catastrophic they are. They're doing it so that you think that they're more common than they actually are, so that you will then be more worried than you should be about them because they are hacking your fucking mind.
True, and you should realize that just by the hyperbolic language that you just used, let alone whoever libs of TikTok or whatever. Grassroots for 5, thank you for the super chat, King. Force everyone to do a full transition every 2 years, and whichever one you are when you die, that's your gender. Again, with the universal basic jail, and every 2 years you switch up.
What is the harm that they create in the world by doing that action, by overemphasizing these cases?
Have you not seen just how mind fucked everybody is? How everyone like believes alternate truths. No one can actually agree on the fact of anything anymore.
So
Like
you think this cultivates an attitude of
the entire
divisiveness?
political environment we've existed in for the past 5 years
Right.
is the result of bad faith actors mind fucking everybody, basically using personalized feeds to show you the thing that you fear the most.
Okay. Well, just the reason I asked was because it's interesting because I realize now that you're both having this conversation that you're kind of making a similar argument.
Yeah, it looks like chat's a little bit split when I'm catching up with you guys. R. Hickernail says they're all missing the point. If the kid is comfortable to come out at school but not at home, clearly there's a problem at home. But I don't think that parents necessarily view it that way. So, for instance, I don't think my son, who doesn't have any gender non-conforming shit, should be dressing in a dress. And maybe it's not against school dress code to wear a dress, but I'm going to tell him you can't wear a fucking dress. To me, that's not a problem in the home, okay? Limiting my child's self-expression to some level of normal, I don't think is abuse. So that's where, but Kay was making the argument that you deal with abuse as it comes. Because if you treat every parent like a potential abuser, then you're going to have endless excuses for the state to do whatever secret fucked up bullshit it wants to do, because it'll just say, oh, well, there's a potential for abuse, so we're not going to do it. I'm going to let Adam be cringe one more time, and then we're going to move into the next segment.
That Adam was making about the emphasis of focusing on crime in terms of like, okay, if someone overemphasizes or over focuses on crime committed by Black people, can create negative racial stereotypes. So he was talking about like, well, that's the harm that's caused by that action. So I was just saying like, the harm that you're saying is caused by this action, because you're saying, yes, there are people that are doing this, but there's an overemphasis, an over exaggeration, people hyper fixating on it. The harm created by that is it creates a culture of division and people becoming mind fucked, essentially, is what.
Yeah, and ignoring, I don't know, the president of the United States being a pedophile, ignoring backstabbing Ukraine resulting in tens of thousands of deaths, slashing USAID in order to save 1.6% of the budget, while also doing tax cuts, meaning we're still running a deficit, but we also just condemned hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to death through preventable disease. Violating the First Amendment by using the FCC chair to attack a stand-up comedian. Violations of due process and reference to mass deportation, where we took people who were not credibly members of gangs like Andre Hernandez Romero and deporting them to Sukkot, where they were sodomized and tortured. Yeah. So when you're focusing on they're transing the kids, you miss all of that information. Azariah for 5 says, what if instead of just extended family model, we went to the lineage model, having your entire bloodline involved clan wars, baby? True. True. Somebody said, wouldn't another scenario be your kid changes their name and changes their pronouns? Yeah, but then that's kind of the question that I put back to you, because I think Kay was saying, yes, you report it to the parents and you deal with abuse as it comes. I'm okay with that, like as an answer. I think Kay probably believes that answer very earnestly and sincerely. I think that R. Hickernill did the steelman of the progressive perspective, which I don't agree with, but I think that it's what progressives say they are genuinely concerned about, which is that if a kid is willing to be gay or trans at school, but they're not willing to be gay or trans at home, isn't that an indication that they potentially could be abused in the home? So I think I'm more favorable towards Kay's model, while I've worked child abuse cases myself. So I also understand the steelman of the progressive perspective.
You're saying.
I think that's actually pretty close to it. Yeah. Here, a more obvious example is, I mean, I don't know about you, Sean, but like I know the three of us agree pretty much entirely on the J6 Eastman riot situation, right? And yet, whenever we've talked to somebody who's like a diehard believer that Trump actually won 2020, and you actually have like a conversation with them, because I've done it, I know that you guys have done it too.
Mm-hmm.
You start talking to them, and they have a completely alternate set of facts that if you actually investigate them, they're like 99% false, but they got them from like a completely different media ecosystem where they're consuming content from completely different people, and it's all just like made up fucking nonsense.
Cyrus Kennedy says, what are you criticizing Sitch and Adam and AJW for? They're saying people are allowed to take issue with the trans issue, and your reply is, but it's an existential issue, therefore they're bad faith. No, I don't even think I fucking said that, Cyrus. I think you have like a literacy problem, which is unsurprising. Unsurprising. But anyways, no, what I'm saying is Dev never said that shit. Dev never said nobody's allowed to take issue with transing kids. What he said is bad faith actors like libs of TikTok are exaggerating the issue for culture war points, so you ignore serious policy issues. That's all he said. And guess what? ShortFatOtaku is correct. Anyways, that's enough of that.
And I think like if you
Adam Friended, unable to understand words. Unsurprising. ShortFatOtaku being correct while still being soy. Unsurprising. Sitch steelmanning the contrarian right-wing perspective while also conceding to descriptive reality because he is capable of understanding words. Unsurprising. End of segment. Thank you for your memberships and your super chats. So, Parasocial, love you guys. See you tonight or see you tomorrow. Have a good one for now. Mwah.